Great. Good afternoon. Again, as promised, we're here to mark the International Mine Awareness Day, and we're joined by Agnes Marcaillou, the head of the UN Mine Action Service, and she is flanked by the deputy representatives, permanent representatives of Afghanistan and of Italy. Agnes,
oui.
if the floor is all yours.
Does it work? Yes.
Yep.
Good afternoon. Thank you for coming here. Some of you are veterans to this annual event marking International Mine Awareness Day. You will have seen in the visitors' lobby that there is a beautiful exhibition that we have put together with a special angle. That special angle is to make sure that you remember that mine action, humanitarian mine action, is 20 years old. It started in the mid-90s with the campaign that promoted and mobilized popular support for the Anti-Personal Mine Ban Convention. And this is where my service, UNMAS, was subsequently established by the General Assembly. So we were talking about anti-personal landmines in those days. And this issue evolved as the nature of conflicts evolved in the past 20 years. The political context, the means, the evolution of the United Nations, of the mandates, to be today an all-encompassing issue that covers everything that explodes, everything that is at the core of the stories that you write on conflicts, at the core of the stories that you write on humanitarian catastrophes and the humanitarian responses of the United Nations. It's at the core of the mandates that the Security Council is negotiating and adopting. And actually, what we have seen in the past year is an increase in the number of Security Council mandates that mention specifically, explicitly, matters of relevance to mine action. What is the world facing today in all the conflicts that you can think of, in all the peace operations that you are interested in? We are faced by the challenges posed by unexploded ordnance. The intensity of the conflicts has risen. The volume of weaponry used has increased. Obviously, the technology has not completely followed because we still have a rate of unexploded ordnance that is increasing the contamination in these countries, that is making the deployment of the United Nations difficult, whether peacekeepers or political missions or humanitarian assistance. We are facing challenges of unexploded ordnance. We are facing the contamination by IEDs. And you will hear from the representatives of two countries that we work very, very closely with. You will hear about IEDs in Afghanistan, but you will also hear about the role that Italy is playing in mobilizing the donors' attention to two things. One, there is an essential role that the United Nations plays in addressing these issues. We coordinate. Coordination is not in a conference room. We are organizing the work of the individual countries, implementing partners, NGOs, local NGOs, in order to make sure that the impact that we must have is made greater by increased coherence of action, exchange of information, and mobilizing donors' attention within Security Council walls and outside in making sure that everybody understands that when a conflict costs so much money, when stabilization is supported increasingly by millions of dollars, all of that will be actually used effectively if the contamination issues is addressed, if we save lives, and that will be my last point, we save lives in clearing. This is the first thing that comes to mind. But the first thing we do is massive risk education campaigns. The refugees and IDPs of Iraq, Somalia, Syria will not wait until the world gives enough money to enough teams to clean an entire country. That takes decades. We need to educate the people so that when they take their destiny in their own hands, they don't die in going back to their homes that are contaminated, or they don't die in trying to rescue their neighbors that are engulfed by collapsed buildings and unexploded ordnance. So risk education campaigns are major. This is where UNMAS is really coordinating international efforts. I can answer some questions later on. So risk education, clearance, and also supporting countries paying a great deal of attention to victims' reintegration. The victims' assistance and their reintegration in society is key because victims are in increasing numbers, 18 a day, estimated. But at one point, these countries will need to be rebuilt and the economies to restart. And you cannot have a whole fringe of the population ignore, marginalized, left aside. These people can be used effectively by their country if they are given a chance. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ambassadors?
Thank you. It could sound a little bit odd to say it's a pleasure to stay here together with Agnes and my Afghan colleague in a day on which we remember a lot of people who lost their lives for mine and other explosive devices. So I don't say it's a pleasure, but I can say it's a moral duty, especially for a representative of Italy. Italy has been for years one of the main producers of the mines, especially personal mine. Someone called it the Ferrari of the mines because they were very effective. We stopped this more than 25 years ago, 30 years ago, but still we are, you found some artifact in the world. It is also one of the reasons why my country has been, from the beginning, one of the main supporters of the activity of the UNMAS and why we are here to celebrate the 20 years of today. I want to start with what I think is the main message that the Secretary General has sent us today in his video message. It basically said peace without human action is incomplete peace. And this is true. We were talking previously with Agnes, because basically what we are talking about here is, you know, we can have some success in Security Council negotiating peace agreement. We can have some efforts to found a political agreement to end, to stop war, etc. But then people need to go back at home. And if there is the high level of contamination, and I'm sure that our African friends will elaborate on this, people cannot go home. That's basically the main reason why we have to increase this activity. And the situation is not improving. It's becoming more complicated because with the spread of the improvised explosive device, the so-called EADs, now it's become very easy. You don't need anymore the Ferrari of the mine to make attacks. You can build it for yourself. We have seen this in every place. In Mali, for instance, the attack to the MONUSCO. But we have seen 2 days ago in St. Petersburg the effect of the EAD. So I want to confirm here our deeply concern for the effect of all these action, but also the strong commitment of Italy on this. For the biennium 2016-2017, we are the current chair of the MASC, the Mine Action Support Group. It's a group created in the aftermath of the Ottawa Convention that unite all the main donors and contributors to the activity of the mining. I hope that we are carrying out a successful chairmanship of this group. But I mean, it's important to raise awareness in every place, in every occasion. This is what we'll continue to do, at least until the end of our chairmanship, and after with our contribution. I want also to stress one point, maybe final point, and then I'm ready to reply to some questions. As maybe you know, my country has passed through very difficult financial crisis years, but we never stopped to finance the man action activity, and Agnes could confirm this. Even during the most complicated period in which there was 1 year on we basically canceled all our commitment, but not the demand action. And this is, I think, the main message to send today for this International Day. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Salarzai?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Thank you for coming here. I don't know how to start, whether read the statement I have prepared or tell you what I have gone through. As someone who is a generation of war from Afghanistan, so I remember when I was born, the war started in Afghanistan, and we grew up with, when we were going to school, I don't know, first or second or third grader, I still remember that we were always afraid of, don't pick up a pen on the way, don't walk from the street on the sides. We always had this fear of mines that we grew up with. But now when you go around Afghanistan, especially if you travel on the highway and you see those stones that are painted blue, white, then you can feel which sense of sort of comfort you get from that, and how important that could be for you, someone who grew up with that fear, and now you see that one. So I think you cannot find words to sort of emphasize the importance of this vital activity, or this vital humanitarian activity that's carried out in Afghanistan with the support of international community, and now mainly, or at least let's say that soon it will be a fully Afghanized operation. So we are one of the most contaminated countries maybe on earth when it comes to mines, and with the highest recorded number of casualties that we have in Afghanistan. I will give you a little bit of detail how we started that. So this mine action program in Afghanistan started in 1989, and it's one of the world's largest. And the focus was to have an Afghanistan free of mine. As ambassador just say that, because we're one of the largest also we have refugee communities in Afghanistan, especially the two of our neighboring countries, Iran and Pakistan, who are hosting at least around 3 million of our refugees. They're starting to come back to Afghanistan, and they left when it was the start of the civil war. So still they have to have that sense of security when they go back to. So the mine action program is essential to their security and to their return back to Afghanistan. In 2013, we started a 10-year work plan in response to the Anti-Personnel Mine Ban Convention, with the aim to create a mine-free Afghanistan by 2023. And to assist this endeavor, we developed our own 5-year strategic plan with five pillars of mine action. And this plan was developed in consultation with the United Nations agencies in Afghanistan, government ministries, international donors, and all other relevant stakeholders. And the aim was to integrate mine action more firmly into broader development plans in Afghanistan, engage with other sectors, and incorporate gender and diversity mainstreaming. In October 2016, the Mine Action Coordination Center for Afghanistan project was dissolved, and transitioning to the technical personnel capacity of the DMAC, and with oversight and direction from them. Currently, UNMAS staff is working in support of the Mine Action Center for after Demining Action Center in Afghanistan. So I will just go directly to the three main issues that we are facing in Afghanistan, and these three main, or let's say key challenges that we are facing in Afghanistan are the insecurity and inaccessibility in Afghanistan, funding shortfalls, and non-stable targets. With the issue of insecurity and inaccessibility in Afghanistan, the continuing conflict in the country makes it difficult to provide mine action service in some contaminated areas. And the Taliban have killed and abducted the miners in several provinces of Afghanistan, while the ongoing insurgency also results in further contamination and leaves behind additional explosive remnants of war and pressure plate improvised explosive devices, which is, again, if you look at least with the number of the casualties that we have from these IEDs is mostly the civilians who just try to get on with their daily life. The funding shortfall, Afghanistan is grateful to the generous assistance it has received from the international community for more than 2 decades. However, the MAPA has been experiencing a continual decline in its yearly financial trend since 2012. Over the past 4 years, only approximately 60% of the funding required to meet the 2023 target was secured for the program. For the current year, $19 million out of 110 million has been secured, the lowest financial contribution towards the 2023 agenda target to date. The non-stable targets, when the 10-year Mine Action Convention work plan was developed in year 2013, the initial target was to clear around 552 square kilometers of contaminated recorded land over the 10-year period. The program has so far seen 43% of the initial target cleared. However, an additional 260 square kilometers of additional hazardous areas have been surveyed and added to database since the implementation of the 10-year work plan that began in 2013, increasing the target area to 813 square kilometers and dropping out the percentage of clear lands to 29% of the target. In order to overcome these challenges, sustained international assistance remains essential for Afghanistan, as reinforced in the self-reliance through mutual accountability framework that Afghanistan has with the international community. That's a relationship between the government of Afghanistan and the international community and relies mutually on agreed commitments and will support the development priorities of the Afghan government. Accordingly, there is a desperate need for increased advocacy and funding for mine action in Afghanistan. This will help to implement the established work plan and ensure the Afghanization of the mine action process. It will also address the increasing challenges posed by the Taliban and the activities of the terrorists. We are grateful to the support provided by UNMAS to date, and we look forward to its future contribution and support. I thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll open up to questions. Edie?
Thank you very much. On behalf of the United Nations Correspondents Association, thank you for doing this press conference. I'm Edith Lederer from the Associated Press. I have 2 questions. Is the UN Mine Action Service now actually, in addition to mines, also doing IEDs and unexploded ordnance? And has this always been going on, or is this something new? And are there any statistics on the state of mines around the world and what you've been able to accomplish in, let's say, in 2016 compared to 2015? And for the Italian ambassador, you talked about the challenge getting more complex, more difficult. How so? Thank you.
Yeah, please.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. The UN Mine Action Service in addition to being on the ground, is also working on policies, standards, concepts. And I can say very proudly that UNMAS was instrumental in explaining to the international community, the General Assembly, that mine action covers IEDs, UXOs, unexploded ordnance. UNMAS is the UN entity specialized in addressing these issues from a policy perspective, from a humanitarian perspective, a peace and security perspective, and an operational technical perspective. Whether it is to advise, assist, train, equip peace operations, or support humanitarian responses, we do that with experts, we do that with the right equipment, and we also are unique in, together with OCHA, in the UN system with our rapid response capacity. You may remember that when Gaza, when the Secretary General in July 2014 called on UNMAS publicly to handle the Gaza issue, we were able to deploy in 3 days. You may recall that this past year, UNMAS, 2 staff of UNMAS in the Gaza program were awarded by the SG its award for courage. You will see soon on YouTube and other places the ordeal that my colleagues face in going down to holes where unexploded aerial bombs were to be found in Gaza. Now, we have success stories. Gaza will be cleared of these unexploded, the known identified unexploded ammunition at the end of 2017. We are wrapping up. God forbid any resumption of the conflict. Gaza is good. You may remember that a few months after the conflict ended in July 14, we made it possible for all the kids of Gaza to go back to school on school day. So we do that. Another success story, because the UN is also about success stories, is what we did in Côte d'Ivoire. Côte d'Ivoire, we were part of the mission. Côte d'Ivoire is not known for mines. It was known for a series of unsafe, unguarded, unstable, small arms, light weapons, ammunition stocks. UNMAS was called in by the Ivorian government and the mission. We mentored and trained an Ivorian capacity to rebuild armories and dispose of what was created a risk of unexploded, accidental explosions and looting. Not only is our success story that we have finished the job, that now the Ivorians would have the capacity to teach other African countries to do the job. They are up to top international standards. But when the mutiny took place a few months ago, and some unhappy soldiers tried to take over weapon stocks, they were not able to break in the new armories that the United Nations had built together with the Ivorian government. So this is to tell you that we work on that. On IEDs, and I will be short on this one, we can take it offline. On IEDs, UNMAS is the lead entity with regard to the elaboration of international norms and standards which do not exist for IEDs. We have initiated a working group that is co-chaired by Belgium and China to elaborate UN standards that will hopefully soon become international standards. We have a special event that is organized this week to present the work we are doing. Together with Afghanistan, we support the work that Afghanistan has done on that resolution, because at the end of the day, we are the practitioners. The fact that UNMAS is in Somalia, Libya, Mali, Syria, Iraq, has given us the expertise gained from all the devices that we find. We deployed in Cameroon and in Nigeria, most recently, at the request of the UN, to explore ways of protecting civilians, but also equipping the country with a better knowledge of the sometimes sophisticated IEDs that may indicate patterns of connections between Boko Haram, Daesh, and others. So we are in the lead to do that. With regard to statistics, you have copies of the annual report of UNMAS available on the table there. If you go to unmass.org, you will have that at hand. Has there been any progress? Yes. I'll give you another success story. That's the last one. Mali. Mali is known, sadly, for an increase in number of attacks using IEDs. We have an increase in number of attacks and an increase in number of IEDs used. And yet, I have reported to the Secretary General, and I can report here, that you are also witnessing a decrease in the casualties of peacekeepers, civilian and uniformed personnel in Mali. This is not just magic. This is related to the work we've tackled and led on training, on mentoring of the troop contributing countries, police contributing countries, the Malian defense and security forces, in advising them on the right equipment, how to use this equipment. So this is where you have a good corpus body of things. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a question for me. I mean, it's very multifaceted, complex question, and so I just could give two ideas from but this is by far more complicated. I think the situation is becoming more complicated for the EID, as we said, because 25 years ago, already existed EIDs. Don't quote me, but I came from a part of Italy where some organization, not state organization, used the EID. I'm from the south of Italy. But it's not silly to say that today there is internet. So it's by far more easy to build EID. And also the creativity of the EID has increased hundreds of times, first. Second, we are facing today a threat coming, an increasing threat coming from not statual actors. In some way, even forgive me if I say this, even the Taliban are a sort of state of organization. But today, the situation is by far more multiplied by these actors that it's almost impossible to control everybody. So this is the two main menaces that I say that we have to increase our efforts, because the threat of the mines are increasing and not declining.
If I can just add on the issue of the Taliban and the issue of IEDs. See, in our case, it's complicated and it's so simple. It's so simple for the fact that we don't have those ingredients that can make the IEDs in Afghanistan, especially the two ingredients, those you call it, I know, ammonium nitrate or something, that one, plus the detonators. We don't have any. We're not an industrial country to produce those things. One, and in a certain number of cases where we have been able to diffuse these IEDs, I think we do. Our forces do on daily basis. I think numerous of them. We have clear marking on where these ingredients are coming from, and we did have highlighted them with our international partners. So what we need in this case is that let's say that's a support from our international partners to put pressure on certain countries who provide and produce these things to put a ban on that. And we did make a reference to these kind of issues in our IED resolution, the first of its kind in the, I think, in the United Nations to have a resolution on IED.
Thank you. Evelyn?
Thank you. Evelyn Leopold. A couple questions. When was the Côte d'Ivoire mine clearance started? Not mine clearance, ammunition clearance. And you mentioned Syria. Are you there too? And if so, where and how? And you're saying that the Taliban is laying IUDs or landmines all over the place? Is that what you said, or is that what you meant?
I will start with we started in Côte d'Ivoire as part of UNOC in 2011, and I encourage you to. I think we have a good documentation on our website that will show you the before and the after. And it's also to the credit of the Ivoirian government. We need to emphasize the quality of the compact we had with them, and the fact that they're taking their country in their own hands. With regard to Syria, I may come back to the complexity of IEDs. We started hearing about Kobani a few years ago, remember, when the evidence of these atrocious booby traps was brought to the world attention, when people wanted to get back home because they felt that Kobani had been retaken, and it was just to see that the bloodbath was continuing. So this is where Syria, terrorist groups, non-state armed groups, I prefer to call them terrorists than extremist groups. I mean, this is their weapon of terror. This is where they resort to weaponry that will affect the civilian population. It's way more effective against people who are vulnerable than against a well-equipped army. The vulnerability of the people, I would like to share with you quickly here what has touched me. Not only are the civilians like you and me vulnerable to the threat of an IED, but we are increasingly vulnerable when we are consistently displaced. So the risk education campaign we carry out, have to be done time and again, because the minute that these people, these families, become familiar with an environment, it is time for them to pack up and leave, because the conflict is moving. As they are moving and being consistently displaced, they are consistently malnourished, sick, vulnerable. The attention span, the desperation clicks in, and it increases the vulnerability of these people. So this is really what you and we need to keep in mind when we're talking about IDPs and refugees, and just get into the situation. These IEDs we need to know, to be precise about what we're talking about. And again, this is where UNMAS work on policy and norms is important. We produced the international lexicon on IEDs, because like in the mid-90s, when everything that was going off was called a landmine, today everything that goes off is called an IED. People don't speak English, they are not expert in explosive hazards, and some others just take a shortcut. It results in the spread of the terror that it puts in people's heart. It results in an increase in the bill that countries and the UN will pay when we hire those who go to clear these places. And I will give you an example, which is Iraq-related. At the beginning, everybody was talking about Ramadi was filled with IEDs. Actually, a good assessment by a couple of experts from UNMAS and others showed that the contamination was a lot about unexploded ordnance from the conflict, The Iraqi forces and others just bombed and retook Ramadi. Two, when we looked at these IEDs, they were what my colleague Mr. Heslop here, who is really the expert here, would say pressure plated, something that could be associated to a landmine, you victim activated. We call that victim activated. And a number of others were very sophisticated. So it is important also, because when it comes to victim activated, in the case of Afghanistan, Iraq, or Syria, there is a local capacity that we, the United Nations, can rely on to clear it. When it becomes very sophisticated with anti-handling devices, which means whichever way you take it, you're going to blow up. Syria, Palmyra, various places in Iraq, then you need very sophisticated expertise to deal with this. So in Syria, we are operating remotely from Gaziantep to that part, which is the opposition-controlled area or the non-governmental controlled area. There are many, many terminologies used. We are not cross-border UNMAS. We are actually empowering, equipping local NGOs. We are protecting them in protecting their anonymity. Otherwise, they would not be able to last for long. And we have been able to build a very cross-checked, reliable network of local NGOs that we train in search and rescue, that we train in risk education, that we train in safe destruction of cluster munitions. What is essential is for those people who will return home at all costs not to die after having survived the bombing. So this is what we do. The risk education is completely tailored to the population, gender, age, the kids that need to have access to that. It's working pretty well. In the governmental controlled area of Syria, UNMAS is in close contact with the government of Syria to establish a presence, to do humanitarian demining, based, I would say, on the principle that a Syrian is a Syrian, and that saving the life of a Syrian, whether that kid or that civilian is in the north or in the south, we have a humanitarian commitment to risk educate and, again, train those who will come with bulldozers to move the rubble, not to die in doing so. Thank you.
I think we have to let Ambassador Lambertini go. We'll take a few more questions. That's okay. We'll just take a few more questions. Thank you, sir. Matthew, then Majid. Yeah, please go ahead.
Can I ask one Italy question, just very quickly?
There is other Italian.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Okay, good. All right, great. Thanks a lot.
Yes, go ahead,
please.
Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Let's be clear on one thing, that when it comes to the issue of planting the IEDs in Afghanistan, the Taliban are in clear violation of the international humanitarian law. That has to be very clear, because if you look at the way they plant those IEDs, is mainly on highways, where is like as it was previously is pointed out to this issue. They plant an IED with the let's say that with the hope that there will be a military convoy passing on that, but it's not the case. We have seen people going to weddings. An entire family of 16, 17 have vanished in those kind of incidents. We have seen kids going to school have died in that. Like the air suicide attacks, when they do it in populated areas, this is also they don't have any respect for the, let's say that, for those civilians around those areas where they do these activities. And when it comes to the sophistication of the method they use, one has to be clear on this one too, that it's not the Taliban who can do that. If you go to those madrasas where they are being trained, there is no subject as a science in there. It's all religious affairs, it's all religious books, and they never teach them how to make this. So in our case, we do this. We do believe that they are foreign backers, those who are, or we call them their masters, who provide them with this sort of technology and sophistication to kill the innocent civilians in Afghanistan.
Thank you. Matthew, then Majid. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Matthew Lee, Intercity Press, on behalf of the Free UN Coast for Access. Thanks for the briefing and the extensive answers. I wanted to ask, I'd meant to ask you about Libya, but since you mentioned Cameroon, I didn't expect that. Can you describe, like, you said the UN had asked you to go in. What exactly you do in the country? The Italian ambassador had mentioned the internet, and I wanted to know if in your work in Cameroon you're aware that the internet has been turned off in 2 regions of the country for more than 70 days, and what you think the UN should do about that. But particularly in Libya, because it's listed on your sheet, what is your work? And do you work with both the UN recognized government, and also there's some areas of the country that are not controlled by that government? Do you do any work there? I'm thinking of Ganfuda, but anything you could say about Libya would be great. And the question for Italy was actually, it had to do with that announcement on Friday. One, if you want to say what you fund of UNMAS in Libya, but what is the agreement between Libya and the tribes in terms of refugee flows? Because
Let's focus on UNMAS and
well,
we can take that offline. Thank you. Go ahead.
this has to do with mines and weapons.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Matthew.
Thank you. I'll try to cover as much as I can in Matthew's question. Cameroon, we had been aware for some time of the fact that Boko Haram in that region was resorting to IEDs. It became more obvious to the local countries like Nigeria and Cameroon, I mean the Lake Chad Basin, I would say, in the recent past. The UN country team, the humanitarian side of the country team, called on UNMAS to deploy a couple of experts to actually give them an assessment of the situation and recommend a few actions. So the assessment was clear, there is an issue, and as much as it is not yet an extensive issue in our view, the perception is there, we need to address it, to prepare the population. So what we have done is immediately start, it's a small scale, but we have immediately started in distributing, training people in risk education, distributing the messaging through schools, through communities. We are very, as we say here, very into hiring women to be trained and reach out to the local community and villages in order to at least protect them. Now, we are also in touch with the government to see what side of the capacity of the government would have to be looked into and what we could do to help them build the capacity. But that may be just a recommendation. We may or may not do it. We may recommend to those countries in a position to do so or there to actually help us beef up the capacity of a Cameroonian response to that. We are also looking at other countries because it is a cross-border threat. And I would say what is very important for us is to sensitize those governments that it is a cross-border activity and that we need to tackle it in the big picture. The fact that internet was cut off is something that I know because we all read what you write about these things, and what can be done about that is, you know me enough, Matthew. I don't even know if the UN or which part of the UN is dealing with this, but we know that it exists. With regard to Libya, we have been based in Tunisia since the UN ended up its evacuation of Libya a couple of years ago, but we did not remain inactive. We have kept our contacts in Libya. We do advise the mission. I mean, it's a special political mission, so we advise the leadership in issues that relate to mine action as a whole, unexploded IEDs and so on. We have continued to train Libyans through an institution that is called the LibMac, There is the Libyan Mine Action Center. It's an institution that exists that has the capacity to reach out to various parts of the countries. We are building on what we had established a few years ago. You may have seen also press reports or internet reports that we have engaged with the support of the government of Switzerland in training Libyan women in small arms and light weapons and ammunition. This has yielded a good deal of results. And through our network, again, remotely, but through contacts we had established in all the parts of Libya before we left the country, we continue to do risk education and the proper training. We have assisted those who were involved in the post-cert handling of the situation. And what we do is really prepare the mission for an eventual return to Libya and be ready in having sensitized everybody's awareness that we're going to face an IED problem when we go back, and that we need to pull resources together to work on it.
Thank you. Majid?
Thank you very much, Stefan. I have, this is Majid Ghali, Iraqi Rudaw Media Network. And I wanted to ask about Iraq. You mentioned Ramadi, but right now we have more areas being retaken from ISIS, which is Sinjar and goes to near Mosul. And the problem is obviously big, and I mean, many people can't go back to their areas. Actually, most of the people, especially in Sinjar, can't go back to the area because of the booby traps and IEDs and other kind of explosives. And I mean, about a month ago, I even lost a colleague of mine going to one of those areas. My point is, when I look at the funding of your program, of the 112 million you need, you only got about 16 million. Yeah. How is that impacting your work in Iraq? And can you give me a sense how big the challenge is? And for Mr. Nazifullah, I have one question. It's about Taliban, but not necessarily about mining. Last week, a top U.S. general said Russia is collaborating with Taliban. Do you have any, does your government has any information about that? If yes, what do you plan to do about it? Thank you very much.
Thank you. On Iraq, you may be interested to know, and I'm very pleased to say that in addition to the coordination work that we did in Ramadi and the assistance to the government of Iraq, we did such a good job in opening the re-entry of the UN and others to Fallujah that a couple of weeks ago I got a letter of thanks from the mayor of Fallujah because the road to Fallujah was littered with IEDs of all kinds. And UNMAS, not implementing partners, they were my colleagues, actually were able to make it safe for the UN assessment missions and the humanitarians. And we continue to work on that. So it's Ramadi, it's Fallujah, it's Tikrit, and it's Mosul, of course. It is sophisticated, it is complex, it is a huge magnitude. You have heard me say in the past as a ballpark figure that in the case of Iraq and I would say Syria, we are looking at 40 to 50 years of work to clear the country. Now, this is what we are looking at. Decades of work for these countries to look like post-Second World War Europe, where we still find some unexploded ordnance here and there. It is complex, it is big, it is not incurable. So the job we do in UNMAS is at least simple in the sense that the more funding there is available, the more teams we will be able to hire, the more training we will be able to dispense to Iraqi forces and others. So this is when we build a capacity. So what we do in Iraq is really assess the situation and immediately coordinate who is already there. You have countries acting individually, and you have those who support the United Nations implementing partners. So you have two streams of activities. We coordinate in order for the teams not to be all together at the same place. And we prioritize together. We exchange information on the nature of the IEDs we find. And for that, it is the coordination and the action. It's a matter of money. The end game is to empower the government of Iraq to take care of its own problem, like the French and the Germans and the Brits do it in their own country. But for that, we need to bring in the expertise that is needed for some parts of the work, and for that we need funding. That funding is insufficient? Yes. That's a lesson learned for anybody who's working on Syria right now. Whichever side of Syria you're working on, we cannot function efficiently if the funding is ad hoc, and if every time we need 10 million, 20 million, 50 million for Mosul. I came out publicly to say Mosul 50 million, 50. Is it a lot? No, it's not. When you have 20, 30 countries coming together and giving the 50 million ahead of time, we can plan ahead of time. And the services will be cheaper. And the continuity will make the work more efficient. And the Iraqi government will be able to plan better. We're working on the two sides of Iraq, as you know. Baghdad, the Mine Action Authority of the government of Iraq, that we beef up, we build the capacity. We need them to put their administrative processes in place. When we hire contractors, there is an accreditation process that is needed. We cannot afford having bureaucrats sit on this accreditation process for 2 months, because these people are waiting. And when they're waiting, they're paid. So we are beefing up an administrative capacity. We are identifying an Iraqi capacity, the police, those who are not deployed in the front lines of the conflict, who have a minimum of knowledge of explosives in order to train them more quickly and deploy more quickly. And we mentor them. So we are doing that with Baghdad, and we are doing that in Erbil with the Kurdish region, where we have another presence that is established. Is it incurable? No. We need the international community to put their money where their political statements are. If you want to make progress in Iraq, if you want stabilization, if you want IDPs and refugees to come back and to come back safely, then we need the proper funding. And at the end of the day, the cost that it represents is not so important compared to the cost of the refugees, the cost of the IDPs, the cost of the perception that a country that cannot evolve is about. And again, the UN has proven that this international coordination is needed and effective. Give us the means. I beef up the capacity of my office with these means, and I beef up the capacity we offer to your country.
Ambassador?
On that one, I'll be very brief. I think that stories, I think, for the time being, to some extent, I'm finished. But just to state what our position is on any contacts with the people who are fighting against the government of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. I think we would very much encourage any country that looks at Afghanistan as a legitimate and reliable partner to first, at the first place, talk to the government of Afghanistan. That's their right and their legitimate address that has got demanded from the people of Afghanistan. I think talking to any of those groups, or let's say terrorist groups who are doing nothing other than killing the people of Afghanistan, is a big mistake.
Could I ask for one clarification? When you were talking about $50 million, was that only for Mosul?
Yeah.
For how long? For 1 year?
Yes. Yes. We we came up with an average of 170, 180 million a year for the retaken areas in Iraq. So we had the startup cost, and as we progressed and as more and more areas become available, then we fine-tune the figures and the estimates. But that's really the ballpark figure we are looking at.
So is it 170 to 180 million
a year,
including the 50 million?
including
for
Mosul? Yes.
We'll take two more quick questions. Go ahead, and then News Agency of Nigeria.
Thanks, Steve. Ibtisam Azam from Al Arab Al Jadid newspaper. I have two questions. The first about victim assistance. Does it include only risk education, or you go also for after, like also health, psychological support? Would you please elaborate on that? And regarding financing, to which extent you can put pressure or maybe public pressure on the countries who are party to the conflict and where actually to put more money to your budget to clean their doing? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Victim assistance, we are in some cases facilitating the establishment of programs of victim assistance by a given government. I mean, the rule is always the same. The primary responsibility for the people of a country is the government of that country. So we are here to bring to these governments the knowledge, the experience, the lessons learned, and the experts and the specialists that we can fund to come and build the capacity of a country. It goes from training of surgeons on how to amputate properly the victim of a landmine, which is different from the victim of a car accident, to psychosocial support, rehabilitation, physiotherapy, the laws and regulations that the country will have to put in place. So we cover the whole gamut. We have a very successful program. It's in Afghanistan. It was supported by USAID, and it produced excellent results. It was very closely monitored by the U.S. government, and we have had several generations of assistance to victims of explosive hazards in Afghanistan, where we make sure that those who are targeted are really those that are victims of explosive hazards, because other funding is also funding, victims of car accidents or victims of the workplace. So this is what we do. We are very involved in looking at 3D printing of prosthetic limbs for areas in Syria, for instance. We are looking at the use of new technologies that would make this assistance cheaper. We have come to the conclusion that with 3D printing, in training local populations on how to use a 3D printer for these prosthetic limbs, we could really bring down the cost of a prosthetic limb from, I would say, I was told, 18,000, 20,000 to 3,000 to 5,000. So that's good. And the more we can train, the more 3D printers we can find, the more partnerships we can do with the private sector, the cheaper the cost will be. So this is an avenue that is very close to my heart. With regard to funding, you have a number of international instruments. And I would take the one that is the most I would say universal, which is the Convention on Conventional Weapons, CCW, which makes it clear that there is a responsibility for all the states parties to the CCW to share information and data and support when it comes to unexploded ordnance and also IEDs. So we have that. Putting pressure on the international community as the United Nations. We can make appeals, we can partner with you, we can make it known. And for that, I would say the campaign that the UN Global Advocate has launched, Mr. Daniel Craig, who cannot be here today because he's busy otherwise, but Mr. Craig has donated his precious and expensive time to us to do this YouTube video, this UNMAS campaign that is not only aimed at raising funding for UNMAS. I need money to maintain my office here in New York, as mundane as it sounds. I don't have that funding. But it's most importantly, or equally importantly, to raise public support and awareness on what Mine Action is about. So everything you can do to meet Mr. Craig and win an Aston Martin, publicize it, that's going to be good for all the people in the world. The more capacity UNMAS can have, the more we can help. Maybe a last point on victim assistance. UNMAS has led the UN policy on victim assistance. It's on the website. You may wish to look into that to see actually how we have decided to bring the United Nations system together so that the UNICEF and UNDP and WFP and others can speak the same language and work in unison on issues as important as victim assistance.
One last question from the news agency of Nigeria.
Thank you. 2 days ago, the Nigerian Army chief raised the alarm that Boko Haram terrorists have contaminated Sambisa forest with landmines. He specifically said the challenge of clearing the area was huge, yeah, and that it was practically impossible without the support of the UN. Yeah. So I want to ask if UNMAS is heeding the call, and in what way does he intend to support?
Thank you. As I mentioned, thank you for this question. As I mentioned, UNMAS is, I'm about to send, or they have arrived already. They arrived today. A couple of people to Nigeria to explore this matter further. I would say the standard answer is that we need, first and foremost, the involvement of the country in looking at this threat. It's a partnership. The United Nations, UNMAS, has no magic wand. We need to get an assessment of the problem together, evaluate the capacities of the government together, and then the government of Nigeria will take the lead in mobilizing the international community's support, because everything that we will do together at one point or another in Nigeria will require funding. It's always the same thing. We need the engagement, concrete engagement of the government. We need to have an evidence that the government of Nigeria has put this question as a top priority on their agenda, that the army is committing people, that the equipment is there, that the money that is available in the defense budget, foreign affairs budget, and others is somehow looked into in order to reallocate that, and then we will work together. But right now, the positive side of the story is we have responded to the call, and I have a couple of people arriving in country today to discuss it further.
Great. Thank you very much.